Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Weekly Armchair Sports Talk podcast. This is our United podcast, Devil's Advocate. I'm your host, Keane, here today. I'm joined by a very special guest here this evening. I'm joined by Shaun Connolly from Stretty News and also now of Beat 102 and 103 as well. We're here to talk all things Manchester United today, all the latest news, and obviously the breaking news of Jim Ratcliffe's interest in Manchester United. First of all, Shaun, great to have you on. I've been pushing to get you on in the last kind of couple of weeks, but it's finally good to have you on. And Joe, obviously, I follow a lot of your kind of threads on Twitter and obviously on the Stretty cast with Dale and Brian. How's
Yeah.
how are you?
Oh, well, it's great to finally get a chance to come on and talk with you. Doing good. It was a shame we had to postpone it the last time, but sometimes these things happen. And good form. Happy to be here.
That's good. That's good. And obviously, look, that with the news coming out in the kind of last like 24 hours in terms of the football club and potential direction it could be going in, I think every United fan has found a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. I know we'll kind of expand on that as we kind of grow on in the podcast. But I suppose, Sean, before we kind of dive into all the latest topics about United, I kind of want to get a background on yourself and your work with Stretty News. Obviously, you're working with Dale O'Donnell. On Stretty News, you do the Stretty cast as well. How do you get involved with Stretty News?
How did I get involved with Stretty News? Well, look, I suppose I'm 4 decades going over to Manchester. I'm approaching 40. I have a couple of years and I'm nearly 40. So I'm writing about Manchester United for probably more than a decade at this stage. I wrote for various different blogs and fanzines and just tried to get my head out there and my neck out there wherever I possibly could, if it was anywhere in sort of media or in radio. And it was only just through chance, through social media, about maybe 3 years ago, I came across Dale and we just started talking, and I hit it off with him. He's a good guy, and we're very like-minded in terms of, I suppose, how we feel the club should be run and the approach it should be taking with ownership, and obviously everything how it has stagnated. So it was 2 like minds, and basically Dale gave me a platform that I was able to publish as much content as I wanted and just get my voice out there.
Yeah, like I do appreciate a lot of the work Joe you do over there, and like I do follow kind of a lot of the threads you do as well on the football club, and like I suppose there's many different outlets out there these days that do post kind of a lot of news, a lot of content, but I think there's a lot of sensationalism in kind of in this space and in terms of covering Manchester United, and yourself and Dale and the lads, like you do very good work there, and especially during Solskjaer. I think the most time I've seen your work is during Solskjaer's tenure. Because I think, look, we both know ourselves kind of what social media was like. During Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tenure as Manchester United manager wasn't kind of
it's really toxic.
That's the word, toxic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and that's where I kind of caught your work, and I really do appreciate that level-headed approach, because that's the way I'd be as well in terms of kind of looking at the club and obviously kind of looking at everything with kind of, I suppose, a measured view, because I think sometimes agendas do kind of get in the way of kind of, I suppose, the reality of the situation.
Oh, 100%. It's, you see, I've said for many years that text is it's so easy to misinterpret text. And then when text is elaborated and expanded as much as it can be on social media across via, whether it's a thread or whether it's WordPress or whatever sort of format you want, someone can take an opinion, and an opinion can grow into a narrative, and a narrative can then grow into an agenda. And when that happens and you have such an ability to develop a cult following online, it makes these agendas turn from something very, very small into something very, very large. And I mean, it's good that you made mention of Solskjaer, because as much as I have supported the club throughout the years, and I'll support everybody, I'll support every manager, I'll support every player that comes to the club, because ultimately that's what we're here for. And when Solskjaer came, I saw a level of toxicity that I never, ever could have understood a fan base would actually do so, especially to somebody that I idolize, somebody that I absolutely idolize. Like, I was very, very young when Solskjaer was at the club. Like, I was born in 1985. So I got my teenage years and I got to witness 99. And for a guy that had nothing but passion for the club, he wanted nothing but the best for this football club. That was all he wanted. And you could see it even when you drove it back to the days when he went to Mold and he got the contract stipulation. that should Manchester United approach him, that there was going to be no quabble about it. He was going to be allowed to go to the club. This is someone that literally wanted nothing but the best for the club. And despite what some people might have had you believe, he was building towards something. He did have a style of play. And the club was working toward one goal. It was quite clear what he wanted to achieve with the likes of Mason Greenwood, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, to have interchange in that front line. But so much of social media and the online presence just decided to turn against him. And it became a tit-for-tat battle online, and it was just so unnecessary. It took away from the love of what should have been just supporting what has arguably been the best football that we've had post-Ferguson.
Yeah, and it was, I think that kind of 12 to 18 months was rough really on social media. Like after a loss, I used to, like, sometimes I'd bite, but then other times I'd have to put the phone down because, there's, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of like misinterpretation of points on social media.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we are in this day and age, and it's something that's probably not changing, regardless of what happens to what the club's showing. Want to dive into kind of Manchester United. Obviously, like, look, there's the start of the season hasn't been great by any stretch. Obviously with 2 defeats, start of the Eric Ten Hag era. But in terms of obviously off the pitch, there seems to be a lot of noise around the Glazer ownership at the moment. Obviously in the last 24 hours, Sean, there's been reports that the club is up for sale. And there's been obviously different reports that that there's maybe shares are there to be got. What's your opinion in terms of the I suppose Manchester United potentially being up for sale and maybe seeing kind of a light at the end of the tunnel with regards to like the Glazer ownership?
Well, I suppose just to touch on, because obviously we've mentioned Stretty News already. This is something that we broke with Stretty News on Monday. That this is something that's been in the pipeline, and as it progresses and it manifests on throughout the week, it appears that it's something that's been in the pipeline for more than days and weeks. That this is something that has been in the pipeline for months now, it would appear. In terms of how it's sort of changed and transitioned over the last 24 to 48 hours, maybe about 6 hours ago, it was appearing that it was going to be a willingness to sell a minority share in the club. And I mean, as is the nature with everything we talk about online, that's immediately met with negativity because it's, they're still going to be there. What's the point of them selling such a minority share in it? But ultimately, even if it was just a minority share, it's one of those situations whereby people they have short memories. Go back to 2005 and when the Glazers were there. That's how the Glazers actually got into the club in the first place, was by buying minority shares and by cultivating and developing their ownership within the club until they eventually consumed it. So I suppose if you had asked me this morning how I felt about it, that's how it was likely looking, that it was going to be going towards a minority share and that someone had an opportunity to come in as an investor. But I didn't really think that was the full scale of it, because ultimately what investor is going to want to invest in a short-term project at that football club the way it's being run? So it makes a whole lot more sense when you've got Jim Ratcliffe coming out now and he's got a long-term goal. That's what his spokespeople, like obviously his people are saying now, that he's interested in going in a short-term perspective with a long-term vision and a long-term goal of ownership. So, I mean, ultimately, we can talk about the Glazers till we go blue in the face. They are fundamentally the issue that's at the football club. The players can take an awful lot of the blame because ultimately they're the ones that are out on the pitch and they're the ones that are failing to deliver performances. You made reference to Eric Ten Hag's tenure and the absolutely abysmal performances that we've just witnessed in the opening 2 games. But realistically, you can go back further than that.
Yeah,
if you're taking 20 to 25 games, we're in relegation, and the club is broken. It's not that there's problems at the club. The club is broken. And how the club managed to convince Eric Ten Hag to come to the club in the first place, I'll never understand. He must have been missold an absolute mystery box of lies in terms of getting him to come to the club, because the sheer lack of backing that he's received. And it's evident that nothing more is going to happen this summer. Everything that's being put in front of us with Frenkie de Jong and with everything, it's a smokescreen for nothing else to happen. It's the very same as Jadon Sancho from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's lies, and it's a cultivation of lies. And ultimately, when you've got the very, very top of the ladder in the Glazers, I suppose their ethos is just centralized around money. That's the only thing they care about. It's money. It's not results. It's money. And when you have that, and that is the influence that you're cascading down a ladder, then you start generating a squad of footballers that, instead of having a mentality of what can I do for Manchester United, it's what can Manchester United do for me. And I think that was really epitomized when Paul Pogba was being spoken about with his contract and negotiations, that he wasn't offered enough. It wasn't enough that he was getting a small fortune to play for the football club as it was. He wanted more. And even though the club offered him more, and it might have been maybe 2-3% more than what he was on, it was still a huge wage rise on top of an already huge wage. But that didn't interest him enough. We used to have a day of players wanting to come and play for Manchester United in the Theatre of Dreams, that they would talk about this amazing stadium, an atmosphere that was absolutely bouncing, and to have the opportunity as a professional to play there and to have a career there was just all they wanted. It's transcended because of this ownership to we're now a laughingstock. And I mean, it's literally day after day, it's just getting worse and worse and worse because of these cretins that just care about money and do not care about you and I.
And that's the thing. And I think that's where I think the culture of the football club in the last 17 years has been set from the top. And that's like, people can say like, yes, the players are the people on the pitch and they're responsible. But if you look over a long-term perspective, like if the standard at the top isn't there, like as they say, shit goes downhill. Yeah. And essentially what you are seeing there is obviously a cultivation of 17 years of mismanagement. Obviously, during that time frame, Sir Alex was just a freak in nature while they were there, and he still won despite of the Glazers. Do you know what I mean? Like, even when he came in, like, people can say the Glazers backed him, but if you look at the amount of summers that we had where we were linked with top players and we got priced out of them deals because of them. Fergie wanted Wesley Sneijder, Nico Goitan, all these players. I know there, if you look back in United folklore in terms of players who are linked to it, and you're doing pub quizzes, they'd be mentioned. But if you look down the years, these are players who the Glazers have failed to provide Sir Alex with.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of, and then after that, obviously, because Sir Alex wasn't there at the football club, the cracks really started to show in terms of their mismanagement, because in that time you lost Sir Alex, you lost David Gill, and then all of a sudden we had investment bankers come in. Ed Woodward obviously came in that time. And like, if you look at it, probably was like, if you put him in the business side of the club, he would have been fantastic. If he stayed there, they put him just strictly right there, he would have been fine. He was inexperienced in running a football club on the football side. And again, that's down to Glazer's mismanagement in terms of that. So like, I think you have to look at it and say, like, yes, you can appoint managers, like we pointed Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, David Moyes, brilliant managers, Solskjaer, though he done very well at the club for a good period of time. Ralph Rangnick, I know he's more renowned for being a director of football, but these are all very good footballing people, like in this sport. They're all like from all different perspectives and styles of play. Like, if they got proper backing, we would have seen Manchester United be at a topper scale that we were under him. I think that's where all these managers we had, the Glazers, have undermined them. They've undermined their chief executives. They've undermined the fans. And the fans have been treated just simply as customers to the Glazers. And essentially, like, look, we're looking at post-COVID-19, the amount of money this club has lost. Obviously, the pandemic has had, like, an effect on that. But the fact they've taken out 100 million loan to cover operating costs during that time. You look at other things that happened then in terms of, like, you look at the transfer market, how, like, Erik ten Hag is this brilliant manager, like, coming from Ajax, just won the league there, and he has a, like, very brilliant style of play. And this is obviously a team then you have there, who's finished, sixth in the league last season. And we had, like, as you said, last 20-25 games, we played very, very poorly. And you've provided that manager with the same players, essentially, that underperformed last season. And then consequently, you don't give Erik ten Hag, Frankie de Jong, you don't give him, these other players, who can come in and help, I suppose, adapt his style to the football club. And I think that's where consistently over 17 years, managers have been undermined by this ownership. And eventually, like, it gets to a point where there is an end game. And I think right now, like, because of the state of the football club and how bad it's got over the last 12 months, now was the right time for him to sell. and it looks like we may be getting to that point.
I disagree with that very much so, because also you have to look at it over the course of their tenure. I think now, correct me if I'm wrong, there was 2 summers where they didn't. I suppose, look, the owners are very reactionary, and they've always been very reactionary. And obviously, let's say a poor season would then culminate with the owners, not necessarily because obviously they're not putting their own money in, but allotting the money that the club is making towards investment in the squad to be able to try to regenerate the position back into a top 4 the following season. I think there was 2 seasons they didn't do it, once under Mourinho and then obviously with Solskjaer. But as you said, the way it's standing right now with the current state of affairs, it's about as bad as it's been last year. And you would have expected, especially with the exodus of first team senior players that left the squad, that there was going to be at least, I know we need 7, 8 players, but you would have been at least expecting that you'd be talking 4, maybe 5 players coming in that could impact the first squad. Obviously, we've seen nothing like that. And to me, it just very much looks as though it's now in a situation of, well, I'm not going to be here. So why am I going to spend more money? Let's leave it to the next person. It's their problem. It's not my problem. Because the way that they have acted in the transfer market this summer, it's not symbolic of somebody that's got a plan for the club or someone that's got any sort of long-term thinking. It's someone that's looking like, okay, we got to bust it straight. It's time to get out of here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think especially this summer, you're seeing all the hallmarks of like the panic button isn't been hit by the Glazers, because usually when we don't finish in the top 4 or win Europa League like Mourinho did when he finished 6th but still got back in to the Champions League, the Glazers would always kind of back that manager to do the bare minimum to get back into the top 4. Yeah. But like, I think this is a situation now where you're absolutely right. The fact of the matter is, the fact we haven't seen a manager get significant backing despite being outside of the Glazers' holy grail, which is Champions League football. I think this is where they've seen it. They're like, look, why should we invest? Even though, to be fair, if you look at 17 years, they haven't invested a penny. Any transfer window so that we have like bought players, it's all been money generated from our own earnings. And I think like even now, like the cash flow is so low in the football club at the minute that there's a struggle for us to go out and buy players that we have to sell to buy. Like even if you look, I know the other day, like the James Garner information.
I was just going to say it to you.
Yeah, like literally the James Garner story, like the fact that we're looking to sell him to bring in Adrian Rabiot, and all of a sudden Rabiot's after obviously falling apart there now. But like the fact we have to sell James Garner, who's a young prospect and like in my opinion someone who could be utilised in the squad this season, and considering we already are struggling in midfield, it kind of alarms me that the cash flow in this club is really low. And like if we don't get a takeover within the next 12 to 18 months, and if we don't get the top 4 in the next, let's say, 1 to 2 seasons, or obviously get through Europa League, we may be in for even tougher times, because the Adidas deal is up as well very soon, and TeamViewer have pulled, and other sponsors are unhappy at the minute. So I think if there's ever a point for the Glazers to cash out, it's now, because it could get a lot worse before it gets better.
Well, look, I could never really sit down and attribute any sort of positive business acumen to the owners. I think they've somehow managed to come in and purchase a football club in a manner that will never happen again. But if they had any sort of shrewd business intellect about them whatsoever, they would have gone about a situation over the years of, look, if we invest a little, we can pull a lot more. I mean, they're averaging that they're taking about 22 million in dividends out of the club every single year. I mean, if they were anywhere shrewd whatsoever, as much as we would hate them for it, they could have been taking so much more than that. But they're not good business people. And ultimately, you have laid it out A, B, C, D, E as to all of the glaring issues with the football club at this moment in time. So to me, personally, looking at it from the outside looking in, and with everything that I suppose I know over the last few days, I'd be dumbfounded if there's not some real sort of avenue that it is now looking at an exit plan. I can't see it being anyway sustainable otherwise.
It won't be sustainable, because again, like with all them little things that happen, like the Adidas deal, like not getting top 4, that would be disastrous. But considering the Adidas deal is worth 750 million, that's a lot of money. Like, and you're looking at, let's say if Adidas pulled that, or let's say half that deal in a renegotiating of that, that'll be disastrous for this football club. It really would. TeamViewer pulling after only being there for 12 months. That's absolutely disastrous as well. I think
you
that's
even look at it. Even look at it that the differential between the Chevrolet and the TeamViewer deal. Now I know that people could argue and say that the Chevrolet deal, they got it on the top side of the market as opposed to TeamViewer coming in at sort of normal market value, but still, it's still a differential in revenue that's brought in through commercial assets. So it's showing that the club, even though it's held in this really high esteem of being a commercial monster, and the whole thing that football results don't dictate what happens on a commercial aspect, they clearly do. And this is evident.
Yeah, and this is where like the I think as you said, the Glazers have really underestimated the footballing side of things because obviously they come from a background of like they own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and obviously it doesn't matter how you play in the football over in
The
America.
NFL.
Yeah. I had to think about what it was.
You're all right.
Sports over there. But like there's a different philosophy there that success isn't that important there. And like that's where I think the Glazers have underestimated like what happens over here. Like it's a lot different. You need to be successful on the pitch to be successful financially as well. Like, I think this is where the Glazers, like, time has caught up with them, and eventually now this is going to be a situation where, as you said, Shaun, it can't be feasible for them to stay on too much longer, considering the fact that you have the club faltering financially. No top player really wants to come to the club at the moment because how unstable it is. And like, look, to be fair, Manchester United will always have that big name. We'll always have that history. We'll always have, the massive fan base that we do have. But on the pitch at the minute, we're not where we want to be, and it is a situation where people are looking from the outside externally, seeing how we're being run, and like what player would at the moment who wants to get to the highest level of football looks at how United are being run and saying, how can I turn that around when they're not consistent with building the football club?
Exactly. And another huge thing, and it really sort of boils into the NFL that you're talking about, the apparent capitulation of the Super League really, really hit them. It really hit them hard because sort of what happens in America, like just use the NFL, for example. With the exception of the Dallas Cowboys, every other franchise in the NFL has got an agreement whereby if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sell a jersey, every single team, with the exception of the Dallas Cowboys, get a percentage of the sale of that shirt. So merchandise is shared throughout every single team. The Cowboys are different because they have such a huge following. They're like the Manchester United, essentially, of the NFL. So they don't want to buy into it. They want to generate their own commercial assets. But this was all in the thought process, and this was all fundamentally brought about with the Super League over here. This was going to be something that we could get into. And as you said, they can go year with year of lack of success with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it doesn't matter because they get stuff like drafts and they get the commercial assets of sales of other clubs.
Tom Brady alone commercially was massive for him as well.
Exactly. And this is a huge reason is with the Ronaldo aspect in the club. Ronaldo is viewed in a similar vein as that. And also with recent reports that you're seeing that Joel had apparently denied any sort of possibility of him leaving the club, that he was going against Ten Hag, that what Ten Hag wanted him out of the club, and Joel was evidently blocking it. He said in no way, shape or form is he leaving the club.
And that's where, again, that's undermining a manager that, that he has his own clear outline, clear plan. Now, look, to be fair, Cristiano is still a goal scorer, and look, if he stays, hopefully Ten Hag get a tune out him, but an unhappy Ronaldo could also be a very big problem at the club if that is the case.
Dumbfounded if he stays. I would be absolutely dumbfounded.
I think it has to get to the point where if the Glazers are selling, and it does get to a point where they are selling, then maybe then you do leave Cristiano because he has said that he's going to do an interview as soon as this transfer window is over.
Yeah.
And like, I think Ronaldo is his own man. I think we all do know that. Like, like he is an entity in himself. Like if he goes out and throws them under the bus, like, that could be damaging their image. And do they want that? I don't think so. So I think for all parties, if you're looking at long-term development for Ten Hag's squad, I think Cristiano, selling him would be the best thing. But again, you have to look, can we get someone in up front, because Martial does have that injury, does have injury problems. No doubt about it. If you look at the style of play Ten Hag wants to play, Anthony Martial, like from a technical standpoint, probably does suit it. But like, again, like Marcus Rashford, can he play up top for a season? The false nine isn't working because we don't have a midfield who can keep the ball and create chances. So, like, I think if United are to get rid of Cristiano, we do have to get a replacement. But when you look at some of the players who were thrown around, like Aubameyang, Morata, and obviously Arnautovic was thrown around, but thank God he didn't get signed. Thank God for that. There was obviously
That's for
not
sure.
only is he past his best, but there's other issues with him as well. Like, I think the club have left this Ronaldo situation a bit too late, and again, it's undermining a manager who, like, again, wants best for the club, wants to be successful, and again, that comes down against mismanagement.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I drawn back on what I said maybe 10 minutes ago. I don't know how they convinced Ten Hag to come to the club. I don't know, was it just the allure of being manager of Manchester United? Because he must have been missold the greatest dream. I mean, obviously coming to the club, he had clearly outlined who he wanted to bring into the club. It was clear he wanted Anthony. You know, he wanted Jurriën Timber at the start, and then Louis van Gaal saw to it that that wasn't going to happen. So he moved away from that, and obviously we moved towards Lisandro Martinez. And Martinez has got all the capabilities of being a great player for the club, which is fantastic. But there's glaring weaknesses in our squad. I mean, we don't have a midfield, and we haven't had a midfield for quite some time. We have a centre forward that has a clear issue, as you just said. I agree with you for what it's worth about what you said about Anthony Martial. If Anthony Martial is interested and he's fit, but that's a big if, then he can be a key player. And I actually think if Martial was fit for the first 2 games of the season, our attack would have functioned an awful lot better. He's always been very, very good as a player with his back to the goal. And a lot of people, I think, it's where this whole agenda thing that we were talking about comes into it. I'm neither pro or con with Martial. Martial has got pros, Martial has cons. You know, when he is turned on, he's a tremendous footballer. But that's the thing, it's when he is turned on. He's, I suppose, how would I put it? I class him, maybe I wouldn't maybe say he's an enigma, but he's definitely very, very temperamental, and I think he's a massive confidence player. And it's been seen when the club has brought the likes of Zlatan and Cavani to the club that he throws his rattle out of the plan because he's not the main man anymore. But ultimately, when he is actually tuned in and he's playing with his back to goal, that's when you get it really, really good. You get it really good in the context of Rashford and Sancho feeding off, and you have that sort of dynamic of a hold-up play, and the wide player has been brought in as inside forwards. But availability is the greatest asset that a footballer can have, and Martial's availability is very, very poor.
Yeah, he has problems with injuries, especially in the last 2 years. Like the amount of muscle injuries he's had, and the amount of time that he's missed as well has been a problem. And then, like as you said, like in terms of competition is coming in, he hasn't thrived under that. Where like you really love your striker to thrive under it, like especially if you look at like the competition. Let's say at Liverpool, to be fair, I hate bringing Liverpool up, but I always kind of have to like look at it like when they had Salah, Mane, Firmino, Jota, Diaz.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when they came in, like when Jota and Diaz came in, Mane's performances went up. Salah still was banging in goals. Firmino was able to come in and do a job when needs be, and they didn't. None of them players folded, to be fair. And I think like we look at Martial in contrast to that, like he hasn't kind of kicked on when the competition has come in. Like the only time I really seen him kick on was when him and Rashford were both playing on the left in 17-18. And remember, they were playing like 60 minutes each, and then one of them would come off and the other would come on. And it seemed like they were all almost in competition with each other, seeing who could score more goals. And then Sanchez came in, and we all know what happened there. But like, that's the only time I've seen kind of Martial thrive under competition, was on that left side of Rashford in 17-18. But it's one of them where you'd love for it to work out because he has the ability, but again, application and also availability, as you said, like you hit the nail on the head, like is what we need at the moment. For commenting here from Mark Sean, it says, and just coming from Tom McDermott on Twitter, and says Glazer family have conducted the first round of first round talks via legal representatives on Tuesday. Initial discussion was regarding a full sale, not a minority. Well, that's interesting. That's hopefully promising that we can get a full sale in there, and obviously, the takeover can happen a bit quicker. And again, like anything, it's going to be a rebuilding process anyway. Like I think one thing we have to be very careful with, even with the takeover happening, like whenever it does happen, I think patience will have to be still even more so given, because you have to look at a situation. If the club's being taken over, there's going to be I dare to say there'll be a new board. They will a few will come in, a few will obviously go. they'll obviously try to back the current manager. It's there. There's going to be a new structure. There's going to be different ideas how the club is run. And I think even if this does happen, I think people have to be very conscious that this isn't going to be a quick fix. Like this is 17 years of
Oh yeah. No,
it has to be cleaned up. It's going to take a long time.
There's going to be a lot more pain before it gets better. But ultimately, I think the vast majority of the fan base will look at the greater good in this and realize that we can write off X, Y, and Z if it means we can be without them, and that we can just start afresh with the right owners, because ultimately that's the most important thing in this. If just say for argument's sake, it became public tomorrow and the Glazers came out and said, yeah, the club is for sale. I mean, ultimately you would expect them to do that because it's going to start bidding more and they'll generate more money for it. So, but then obviously if they're saying the club is for sale, it can drop the share value as well. So there's that can be said as well in it. But if they were to do that tomorrow and to announce that, there's going to be an awful lot of people in this day and age that do have the money to be able to buy the football club. And you have to make sure it's the right people that come in, because ultimately we don't want the wrong owners replacing the wrong owners. We need someone to come in, and we need someone to actually have the core fundamentals of the club at heart and to be able to take us back to where we are. Because look, it's not just on the pitch that's falling apart. The stadium is falling apart. The training ground is not fit for standard. I mean, it needs an entire refresh. And as you said, it's 17 years of mismanagement. It's 17 years of stagnation. It's 17 years of a lack of care to the complete, utter degree from individuals that not only don't care about football, but do not care about this football club. They don't care about you or I. All they care about is dividends, and that's it. And ultimately, if we have to write off this season as well as next season to be able to alleviate us of that particular stagnation, then it is worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm willing to take 2 years of pain.
Yeah.
Bad results, bad performances. If the fact there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think that's the positive thing about it. And look, I'll still be flying over to Manchester, still going to games, still meeting up with the lads. And you know what? Even though I think that bit of trepidation won't be there, when you're meeting up with the lads and you're thinking, oh, look, worried about today, like you're still going to obviously sing your songs, you're going to have the crack, you're going to do a lot. But, the fact that Glazers, if they are leaving and this does go through, there is that air of positivity. And I think Old Trafford would just I know to be fair, Old Trafford, especially the Red Army, they do make a brilliant atmosphere there. But I think that would go up tenfold. I think the atmosphere around the club, I think that as much as some of these players we could argue at times probably aren't good enough, and we know in certain situations they fell. But I think even that they would go up a level or two, knowing that the club is there is change coming. And sometimes with change come positive change. People can talk about change in managers, and realistically, I think most of them players have been there for quite a while now, and they know what the owners are, what they're about, what their mentality is about the club. The fact there's stories that they're going to the board and asking them to sign players, I think that says though they're looking for help. I think the players would even go up a level or two if this was to happen, because obviously there'd be a proper new regime coming in, and it wouldn't be just a PR regime.
Well, you would hope so. You'd hope that there's some semblance of a footballer left inside in them. I mean, I can sympathize in a certain way with pretty much all of them, because you're coming into a situation where probably as a child you thought at some stage, when you knew you were going to be good enough to be a professional footballer, that you'd love to play for Manchester United at some stage. And then you finally get there. It's like the whole adage of you never want to meet your heroes. And it's the ultimate way. It's the ultimate way of disposing that on top of you. I mean, with the current club, the problem that you have, yes, we would hope that they would build from it. But how long is Eric Ten Hag there? And we already have leaks again, like we did last year. So, so the leaks still exist, meaning that the toxicity still exists. And hopefully, if this comes to fruition, as we would pray to God it does, that it does breed a new sense of mentality around the football club. And what we said, that everything resonates from the top and that shit falls downward, that can stop happening because we have the correct ownership and the correct message being sent out from top,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I think, we would want that reaction. I think we always talk about, I always see your Twitter, I see other people like talking on social media, like, in terms of that, and like in terms of looking for a reaction, we're always kind of looking for these players to react. Like if something like this happened, if they didn't react to that, then we'll look, off you go type of thing. Like, if you're not reacting to positive change, then look, we don't want you at the club. But I kind of want to touch on, obviously we touched on the ownership quite a bit at the club, but obviously there's a big game Monday, Sean. There'll be Liverpool at home at Old Trafford. Obviously, like, look, as we touched on previously, we haven't got a point from our first two games, but Liverpool also seem to be in a bit of a situation drawing their first two games as well, and they seem to be dealing with a lot of injuries and suspensions at the minute. Do you think, like, for both clubs, is this game coming at the right time, considering both clubs are kind of, I suppose, in an air of difficulty at the moment?
Well, I suppose for years and years and years, we always spoke about this game and that form goes out the window, so because you would hope that the two teams just play each other, that they're not playing the table, they're not playing form, they're just playing the rivalry that they have. It's really and truly hard to tell how it's going to come to fruition. I mean, for one, obviously, there's a whole lot going to be happening before the game starts. So as long as that goes off in a clear, concise manner, we should have football. If the football goes ahead, even as much of a glass half full type of guy as I am, I wouldn't be going into this with too much confidence, to be honest with you, because I just don't look at it that United can be competitive against anybody at this moment in time. I really don't. But look, as you said, Liverpool have got their own troubles at the moment. They've been very fortuitous against two sides that probably last year they could have put 12 goals past. And it just goes to show that any team in the wrong moment or in the right moment can produce any sort of an outing. But I haven't been impressed with Liverpool so far. I mean, both of their games, I thought they were very dogged. They're not in a good way. They're roguish. I don't think they're defending very well. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of harmony and continuity between their squad. And I know they do have a few players injured. I mean, Klopp would have you think that half their squad was injured, but they have a couple of players injured. And it just goes to show that maybe without that little proper squad depth, there's a lot of depth up front. But then when you look at when you start moving back in midfield and defence, there's not as much depth as I'm sure they would like. And they're missing Thiago Alcantara at the moment, to the best of my knowledge. And he's a big loss there in terms of dictating how they play in the centre of the field, because ultimately with a couple of injuries, you're looking at a midfield that consists of Jordan Henderson and James Milner, who have had a very good career, but ultimately they're not really, they're not going to be knocking on the door of any of their top six rivals, really, So I don't think I could lay any money on it. Obviously,
it's a flip. I think this weekend is like a flip of the coin. Well, Monday, actually, sorry. Like, it's like, to be fair, if United turn up, you never know. We could get a result, but again, like you mentioned, Henderson and Milner, I think they're actually two starting three midfield against us last season, and the 5-0. Obviously, Naby Keita was in there as well, and he never plays well, and he had a stormer at Old Trafford last season. You just don't know, do you? Like, because both clubs
have an amazing ability of making average footballers look like superstars.
Yeah.
And we just do. We have this ability to turn an average footballer or an average team into a fantastic looking team, because we just have made it. We've made it fashionable to be easy to play through the center of the park, and if an opposition team can come against us and they can control the center of the park, they can control the entire game, and that's what happens week in, week out against us.
Yeah, and that's where I think, again, midfield is going to be very interesting. And kind of, I'm interested to see how Ten Hag sets up. Like, is he a bit more pragmatic? As you said, even if the game goes ahead, because it's something I want to touch on finally just before we wrap up.
Sure.
Is obviously the 1958 Sean have done great things since they've been formulated. They've led a lot of fan protests, and they seem to be very proactive in terms of fan engagement, in terms of what their ideas are, in terms of obviously their movement towards the ownership, and kind of, what they've done in terms of being a fan group who was, I suppose, provided us with some consistency in terms of ideas and how the club can be made better. What are your thoughts just on kind of, I suppose, how the 1958 kind of have done their work since kind of April last year, and kind of, the situation where they're going to be proactive towards this ownership, and maybe going forward, can they make, even with the new prospective owners that are coming in, can they be a fan group who can maybe communicate with the new owners and kind of rebuild the relationship between club and the fans?
Well, I suppose, like anything, when you have an organization that grows and maybe accelerates at a rate that somebody isn't quite anticipating it happening, you're going to have issues. I mean, the guys are going about it in such a way that they're a group of Manchester United fans that they want the best for the club, or at least they portray themselves that they want the best for the club. I mean, any fan-led group that is trying to strive towards change for the club and try to engage with club owners at board level or anything, to be able to have some sort of a say towards the supporters being able to have their view and have their football team just deliver something that resembles a sense of pride and a sense of what we are as fans, then it's a good thing. Ultimately, it is a good thing. And I mean, the group is engaging across social media in such a way that they're trying to cultivate an image. And look, if it can strive towards gaining results and it can strive towards, I suppose it's at a crossroads at the moment, because obviously with what's happening with the club being sold. So it's very hard to tell. But ultimately, they're a group that are engaging very much across social media. They're trying to strive for change, and they seem to be going about it in a good way.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think, look, the fact that they're always transparent with what their plans are. I think that, look, if they, like, let's say post Glazers, if and when they do leave, because again, I'm always kind of a glass half full, glass empty kind of guy. There's always a part of me thinks they might just stay just to spite us, because you never know. But like, let's say in a post Glazer Manchester United, and kind of how that outlook can be. I'd love if they stayed as a fan group, and they do. Obviously, I know we have the Manchester United Supporters Trust, and we do have them as well. But if the 1958 can be maintained and become that kind of barrier between the club and the fans, it would be kind of great to see a fan group that continues that transparency, and I suppose rebuild the fractured relationship that this club has with its fans. Because, like, I think, truth be told, especially in the last decade, the relationship between the club and the fans has been very distant, and it's been very closed off. And I think, under new ownership, I'd love to see that change, because you look at other clubs in the league. There's other clubs in the league, who have great full fan owner relationship, and fan club relationship, and I'd love just to see us have that, because we've such a, like, despite, look, I know we discussed social media and like all that hysteria like earlier on the podcast, but in terms of like our fan base, we do have a great fan base for the large majority. We do have a great fan base. We do have a lot of Reds who travel home and away, who really do care about the club. Like, we have the best away fans in the world. I don't care what anybody says. We literally do. We have the best away fans in the world. Like, we're getting bet 4-0 at Brentford the other day, and you think we're in Old Trafford. Like, all you could hear was the United fans. And I really do think that, if we can get these owners out, and we can, whether it's 1958, whether it's Manchester United Supporters Trust, Red Army, whoever it may be, that I think that relationship needs to be built back up, and the trust needs to be there. And I think if we can get that, I think we not only we'll have our club back on the pitch, but I think off the pitch as well. I think we'd have that proper feeling we do have our club back.
Well, I think all of this just it all stems as to whether or not the club is going to be sold. Yeah. Because if the club stays in the exact same manner that it is now, we're not going to have that relationship. It's going to remain fractured, and it's going to continue to remain fractured. So it all stems back to what I said about getting the right owner in. Because if the right owner comes in and you have the right people at board level, they're going to know that there needs to be solid communication with what is arguably the greatest fan base in world football. We're the biggest club in the world. We've always been the biggest club in the world. There's two Irish fellas sitting down having a podcast and having a conversation now about this football club overseas. I had my own seat in that stadium for how many years, and I threw it asunder because of what they were doing to the club. Now, that was just my choice. I'm not saying anything about anybody else, because I have plenty of friends that kept their seats. And the way it is, it's so fractured and it's so painful, and it's easier just to walk away from it because of the pain that they have caused. I came in for a lot of slack on Twitter the other day off a group of fellas that actually obviously quite older than myself. I mean, I'd be a Red since the 80s. I think that a lot of these guys were Red since the late 60s and maybe the early 70s. But I had said that the people I feel most sorry for is my son's generation, because my son is 16. And I feel so sorry for his generation of United supporters because of the amount of pain and misery that's being endured from, I suppose, all his friends, because the majority of them are Liverpool fans, and you're starting to somehow see City jerseys come among them. And that's just all part and parcel of it. But the reasoning behind that, it's not that I feel sorry for them because they're not winning trophies every year. It's that this generation that's coming underneath us, all they've had is Glazer ownership. All they've had is a fractured relationship with the club. And they haven't had the same sort of love. They get to go to the game, and when I bring him over to Old Trafford, he sees this amazing stadium, and brilliant pitch, and gets to see his heroes play. And then he sees them fall flat in their face. And ultimately, it's all a cultivation of what the owners have done to this football club. They have categorically sucked the love out of it, and they do so without a morsel of regret. They do not care. They don't care that you and I are talking about this right now, and they will continue not caring. So the only hope that we can have is that the sale does go through, so as we can rebuild this relationship, and maybe I can get my arse back and my seat back over there in some stage again.
Yeah, definitely. There's nothing like a match day, is there, Sean? Like getting up.
Nothing like it.
Nothing like getting up at stupid o'clock. 12 o'clock at night, leaving to go to Dublin Airport, or nowadays you can go to Cork Airport. Now it's actually quite handy, but it's there's nothing like getting up, going to a game, going to, whether you're going Nags Head, you're going Blaze, Tollgate for the game, and you meet up at Reds, over Manchester or Irish Reds or whoever it may be, and that feeling, like there's nothing like it. I think if we manage to get rid of them, I think it's just going to be such a positive time ahead. And I hope for your son's sake, Sean, that he does see the United that me and you saw, because we've seen some special days this football club. And
we have. But one thing that when I was getting absolute torrid abuse from these lads that were older than me, and they're right, and you see, they missed the point that I was trying to make. But when the glory days come back, because they will come back, he's been a supporter through all the pain, so it'll be all that much sweeter when it does.
More worth it, yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, that short-term pain will be, hopefully it's there for the long-term gain, because as I said, like me and you have seen special days. The lads you're talking to, they've even seen more special days, because they've been supporting even longer than us. Yeah. So hopefully the good days can come back, and hopefully in the podcast down the line, sometime soon, we're talking about a takeover that does come to fruition, and we're talking about hopefully some more positive results as well, because obviously the last kind of 6 months or so at the club, hasn't been great. It's been painful to watch at times. But it's one of them. We can, hopefully more positive times are ahead, and we see often on the pitch a better Manchester United, and I suppose a beast being awoken. Because I'll tell you one thing, I have a lot of people on this podcast who come on who are Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs fans, the lads when we talk about the Premier League.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a lot of stick in the last 2 years I'm doing this podcast. I said to them, I'm holding out, because the minute we come back, I bet you any money you won't come on. And I know that's going to be the case, because we ruined their childhoods, and I'm just waiting for the day where their adulthoods are going to be ruined as well. That's what I'm waiting for.
Just make sure you're twice as loud. Just make sure you just keep shouting and don't ever stop.
I never will, and they know it. They know I won't. But on that point, Sean, we are going to wrap up. It's been a fantastic show, and I've really enjoyed your company here this evening. I hope we get back on at some point soon, and to keep up the good work with Stretty News, and congratulations actually as well on your recent radio gig as well.
Thank you.
You're doing great work there, and you're doing work with Wexford FC at the moment, are you? On beat at the moment.
Yeah. Actually, I went in and I worked directly with Wexford. So I worked on both sides. I worked with Wexford FC, which is the men's side, and I worked with Wexford Youths, which is the women's side. Yeah. So it was a great insight into how a club runs, because I spent time with the chairman, I spent time with the director of football, spent time with both manager of both senior teams, but then I spent time with managers of the underage teams. I got to speak with players. I got to speak with existing players, but I also got time with the first ever club captain and the first ever goal scorer, and also speaking with Rihanna Jarrett, who's an Irish international and is currently playing over in London. So it was brilliant. And even with Tom Elms as well, who's the current assistant manager for the Republic of Ireland ladies senior team. So it was wonderful. Brilliant docuseries out of it. Great people.
Yeah, keep up the good work as well, Joe. 'Cause you're doing great things on both lines, and look, hopefully, we can catch more of that as well. Do catch Shaun's Twitter there, guys, at Shaun Connolly 85, and do give Stretty News a follow on Twitter, and do subscribe to the Stretty Cast as well. So they do great work over there as well, and as Shaun quite rightly pointed out as well, they did break story as well about the movement with the ownership as well. So do check that out. As always, guys, look, do give the podcast a like as well. It does help us a lot, and look. I will be back later on in the week and talking about the Liverpool game in more detail, and I'll have Jack Doherty from Wexford FC. Funny enough, Jack Doherty from Wexford, he is a Liverpool fan. We will have him on the podcast as well. But until then, guys, thanks very much everyone for listening, and we'll see you later on the week.